So every day I get tons of questions on my TikTok. I try my best to answer all of your questions, but I've literally spent the entire day on TikTok a few times. So I'm gonna answer all the questions that you have here. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions you want me to address. So this will be my most common asked questions on TikTok. This is gonna be episode 1, series 1, whatever we wanna call it. So question 1, what is the job of an Army pilot? Well, that depends. If you're a commissioned officer versus a warrant officer. Commissioned officers essentially have 2 jobs. Warrant officers have one very focused job. That's really the main difference between a commissioned officer and a warrant officer. As a commissioned officer, which is what I am, my secondary job is flying the aircraft. Everything else that I need to do in the Army as an officer comes first. For example, planning, preparing, being the officer in command of, for example, a range, making the flight schedules when you're deployed overseas, going to meetings with the leadership to understand what's going on, tracking the maintenance of the aircraft. As an officer, you're doing a few different things at once. And then when you finished all of that, then your flying comes second. As a warrant officer, your job is to fly the aircraft and become really good at it. After you do become really good at it and you become a pilot in command after about 500 hours, you then track to a specific, what we call track. Those tracks are, for example, instructor pilot, maintenance test pilot, safety officer. So you then not only specialize in flying an aircraft, but then you specialize in a specialty within flying the aircraft, like instructing and being an instructor pilot for your unit for the new kids that come out of flight school. Typically, we don't do many other Army functions. We do sleep in the field sometimes when you need to be out close to where those guys are operating. But essentially, your one job in the Army is to fly the aircraft and be really good at it. As an officer, fly the aircraft, be really good at it, and also be really good at the admin stuff. That's also really important. Can MEDEVAC aircraft carry guns? This was actually one of my first videos, I think, that went viral. I just thought of it as just answering your question, and then people found it really interesting. The answer is yes and no. It's a yes because we can carry our personal weapons. For example, we carry an M9, or it's gonna be the M17, and an M4. No, because we can't put a mounted machine gun on the side of an aircraft. It's essentially an ambulance, right? So you can't put a machine gun on an ambulance or a grenade launcher on an ambulance. It's not a good look, but I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, well, you know, the other guys don't care. And listen, I get it. I definitely get it. But the rules are there. It's in the Geneva Conventions. There's certain things that are protected. One of them is an ambulance. You're not supposed to engage in ambulance or an air ambulance. Schools, churches, mosques, religious sites, etc. are also all protected. So no, for that reason, we do not carry any mounted weapons on any military ambulance, even if it's an aircraft. But we do carry our personal weapons in the event that the aircraft breaks and we have to land and now we're in enemy territory. We at least have our personal weapons to protect ourselves. What is the golden hour? So this is actually really interesting, and it applies specifically to MEDEVAC. It's essentially the way we actually operate and how we conduct all of our operations is based on the golden hour. So long story short, if you're able to get to a hospital within an hour after receiving a traumatic injury, your chances of survival stay pretty high. If you exceed that hour, your chances of survival start to plummet. So MEDEVAC, the way we operate is we try to, and our goal is to be able to launch after receiving a MEDEVAC request, fly to and pick up a patient and fly them to a hospital and drop them off within an hour, and we call that hour the golden hour. Do helicopters have autopilot? Yes and no. A lot of these questions are yes and no questions. The ones I fly do not have autopilot. We have essentially a rudimentary autopilot, but it's going to maintain the input that you give it. The newer UH-60s absolutely do have autopilot. They can fly approaches for you. They have a FMS, a flight management system. We do not in the ones that I fly. So essentially, you have to always continuously be flying the aircraft. So a lot of the older guys that have been flying for a while, they'll say, yes, this aircraft absolutely does have autopilot, because look, I give my co-pilot the controls and I say climb, magically the aircraft climbs. Or I say, hey, turn left 20 degrees, the aircraft turns left 20 degrees. So that's an old joke with the older guys, but no, my aircraft does not have autopilot. Most of the newer ones absolutely do, and they perform pretty well. What happens if you have to use the restroom on a flight? I get this question actually pretty often, and the answer is, so the Army gives you the things you need to use the restroom, right? Do we use it? Absolutely not. Because one, they're usually very inconvenient, or two, they're really uncomfortable. And I've talked to some of my Navy pilot friends, and they say the same thing. The Navy provides them with these receptacles, but nobody actually ever uses it. So in my experience, and this is just my experience talking, we've always just used whatever we have available, which is 9 times out of 10 a water bottle for the males. For the females, it would be a little bit more of a challenge. I think most of them may carry the thing that they've been issued to be able to use the restroom. But in a helicopter, the good thing about being in a helicopter is we're never flying usually more than 2 hours in the air. Sometimes we might if we have our external tanks, but 9 times out of 10, wherever you're going is only less than 2 hours away. So you can usually hold it for 2 hours. If you can't hold it for 2 hours, then you better bring something with you to help yourself out, because yeah, it's actually very uncomfortable to try to maneuver yourself to use the restroom in an aircraft, especially a helicopter where it's pretty cramped. What happens if you get sick while flying? So this happens actually quite a bit. This happens not only to pilots, but also crew members and passengers. Usually pilots and crew members, after we've been flying for a few hundred or 1,000 hours, we don't usually get motion sickness anymore. There's different seats in the aircraft that will get you more sick than others. Because if you think about it, as a helicopter, you're kind of doing this when you're flying low level, yanking and banking. And some of our seats face out. So what you're doing is you're looking up and then you're looking down, then you're looking up and then you're looking down. So a lot of people that we take, a lot of passengers especially that we take, when they're sitting in those seats, they almost always get sick. And we just ask them, if they do get sick, their shirts are always tucked in because they're in uniform. We ask them to go ahead and throw up in your shirt so we don't have to clean up their throw up. So I would say if we're taking a group of new people and they've all never been on an aircraft before, chances are high that somebody's going to throw up. And a lot of times they're not. A lot of times they can't communicate with us because they're not on our intercom system. So we won't know until we've landed that, oh, they've got throw up all in their shirt. All in their shirt. So this is my most commonly asked questions on TikTok, episode 1. If you have any questions you would like me to answer, just go ahead and stick them in the comments. I read literally every single comment, so I will make a video to respond to your question. So, see ya.